Oh, you talk a lot.
I do talk a lot, sorry.
All right. So starting here, my name is Brian Wicke. I'm the Chief Police for the City of South St. Paul, and I've been in my position for just over a year now, and I will say unequivocally it's been trial by fire. These last couple of years in public safety, we've experienced challenges like we've never experienced, and South St. Paul's not unique to that. Over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk quick, not as much as Brian, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to see a lot of similarities in our two departments. We have different community challenges. We are structured the same. We operate the same. We have the same philosophies on hiring for character, hiring for ethics, and providing service to our communities. That rolls out across the board. Structure-wise, our department, we are supposed to have 35 officers. Like Brian said, we don't have 35. I'm at 31 right now. Every time I get one, I lose one. I get one and I lose one. Interestingly, we're both sharing the same problem. Our officers that are leaving, they're not leaving to go to other law enforcement agencies. We are now hiring a generation, or 10 years ago actually, we started hiring a generation of employees that entered this career, have done it, they checked it off their list, and they're out. The economy is providing them jobs that make more than our police officers and our firefighters are paid. They've done this job and they're getting out. So that's some of the challenges that I'm seeing in my department. I think I've lost one to a marriage out of state, and I've lost two already this year. 10-year veterans, outstanding cops that are just, they've had enough. They're gonna move on. They're gonna get a job in the private sector, work 8 to 4, not get called in, not have to deal with some of the stressors that we'll talk about in a little bit here. We are a little bit different in the staffing when it comes to our part-time community service officers, and I'll get to that a little bit later on, what we do with them and what our goal is by having 8 community service officers in our community. They focus on our parking complaints. We have a lot of on-street parking in South St. Paul. They focus on our ordinance violations, and they focus on our animal control, and they provide the support that makes our department move forward each and every day. We have 4 full-time support staff workers. I'll call those your traditional face of the police department if you come into our lobby. They provide that level of support. Like West St. Paul, we have an embedded social worker who does amazing work, and we pair them with one officer in our department. The work those two do cannot be replicated and are worth their weight in gold. We also have a crisis response worker. That's a different role. Understand, our embedded social worker are structured that after this uniform, our 911 streetcars have an interaction with someone experiencing a mental health crisis. Our embedded worker and our officer that next day, as soon as possible, try to get out, try to figure out what broke to lead them to have a law enforcement contact and see, do we have the systems in place that we can connect them with the resources to divert them, re-get them on the right path, and divert them away from a future law enforcement contact, which is all of our goal. In contrast to that is our crisis response worker. That is the one when people call into us and they say, hey, I see a guy running down the street naked. Okay, kind of a cop problem, but kind of not. There's obviously something going on in that young man or that young woman's life that really isn't sitting right with them. Are we the appropriate resource to deal with them? Maybe. Are we better off dealing with the traffic control side of it and let a professional who's had this conversation before come up and interact with them, get a blanket around them and get them off the side of that road? That's where our goal is with that crisis response worker. We have one community advocate, that's an intimate partner and sexual violence advocate that works out of our office. That's provided by a nonprofit called 360s Community, who does wonderful work throughout our entire county. This young lady in our office does outstanding work following up with our victims of domestic violence, a significant problem in the city of South St. Paul, and intimate partner violence, and finding a route out of that for them. If we can't get them out of it, we're gonna help them navigate what they're going through.
We also have one of those, we just got ours back, so I forgot to put that in my list.
Like the West St. Paul Police Department, we got anywhere from 12 to 15 reserve officers. Those are young men and women, old young men and women in our communities that volunteer. They wear a uniform slightly different than ours. They support our staff in community events. They support our staff in our day-to-day operations. And quite frankly, at 2 in the morning when bad things happen, and I don't have enough officers and Brian doesn't have enough officers to really resolve this incident, we call these men and women in, and they are on the outside fringes, keeping people away and allowing us to safely operate in that hot zone in the middle. Following that up, we have a Police Explorer program in South St. Paul. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more. We've had that program for about 8-9 years right now. That has proved one of our most valuable feeder programs into our hiring in our department. Some more community engagement pictures. As you see, some of the events are the same, some are different. Much like the West St. Paul Police Department, a focus in our community is engagement with our residents, engagement with our business owners, engagement with every stakeholder in our community. And I think you see that through our hiring standards, and you see that through our day-to-day operations. Now, Brian had a lot of stats, and I'm gonna make fun of him for this. I don't have the luxury of having an analyst. I saw what he presented, and I'm like, I spent like 4 hours on it, and I gave him. So this is what you're getting. I apologize. So this is the data we talked about, our NIDR statistics. Comparison, side by side, West St. Paul and South St. Paul are remarkably similar communities. The challenges we face are remarkably different though. And where I start with is shoplifting. It's gonna come as no surprise to you. In the city of South St. Paul, I think we're in 22, we had 2 shoplifting in South St. Paul. Not a whole lot of retail to steal from. Quite a contrast to what West St. Paul experiences. The difference what we face in South St. Paul, and it's a really hard problem to get our feet on, or to get underneath, is our assault. Our assaults in the city of South St. Paul, the violence that takes place embedded in our community through intimate partner violence and straight out weapon related or hands and fist violence in our community is significantly higher. It's been that way for years. It's not trending up, it's not trending down, it's there. The change that we've seen over the last couple of years, especially since 2020, is the introduction of weapons, specifically handguns, into these confrontations. Our weapon-related offenses, as you move down into our crimes against society, are fairly high for a community of our size. As you look at some of our other stats, we did have 1 homicide last year, and that's a side conversation that involved a marijuana transaction. Marijuana is not a victimless crime like they will, some will have you believe. And then as we move into 23, we are trending in about the same direction. An interesting side note to this, Brian talked about the numbers, and these are buckets that things fall into. We're listed as having 2 homicides already this year. Both of those are stemming from traffic fatalities. One involved an impaired driver, one involved a motorist who ran over a pedestrian. Don't know really on the intent. Because of the nature of the classification where those dumped into, they are classified as homicides, but they're not homicides in the traditional sense that we interact with. Another change with us is staffing. The city of West St. Paul, and I won't speak for Brian, staffs heavily during the day. They have a high call load during the day. In the city of South St. Paul, our call load's just a tad bit less during the day. At nights, we flip. We go through the roof with calls for service. Everyone's home from work. South St. Paul, by far and large, unless you're in our business park, is a bedroom community. People leave and go to work, then they come home, and then they
We
start.
got like 3 times as many bars in South St. Paul.
Yeah. So, and with that, interestingly, what you're gonna see is where we place our priorities. Again, no shock, we don't have to invest a whole lot of time in retail theft prevention in South St. Paul. So where do we invest our time? To some of our alcohol service establishments, and you'll see our DWIs are about 3 times they are in West St. Paul. Because of the problems we have with alcohol-related crashes and fatalities, we have to invest these resources to attempt to solve this problem in our community. So that's some of the side-by-side stats. If you looked at them, generally speaking, they are in alignment with West St. Paul. My contact information is up here if anyone wants to snap a picture, and I can be reached at any time.
Trivia time.